All right, so storytelling and marketing, then we have some examples of good storytelling, and then Grace will take us through volunteering. Now, just in between the storytelling and volunteering, we'll have a nice interview session with Val. So just before we start with the theory and examples and all of that, I'll try to tell a little story. Now, I'm not the perfect storyteller, and this is not the perfect story for kind of corporate surroundings or for enterprises, but I found it kind of a good example to start our session with and our morning with. So I just read a nice thing yesterday. It's about the man in Australia, and the story is from 1983. There was a marathon being run and held every year, I think, from Sydney to Melbourne. And it was a long, long race. It was about 5 days long, and it was over professional runners. And there comes this man, and he was a farmer, and he came in his wellies and you know, his coat and all dressed for rain because he expected rain. And he signed up. Now he had to fill in the form saying who's his trainer, and he didn't have a trainer, so he just put his mother's name in there. So people kind of started, you know, giggling a little bit and didn't know what to expect from him. And he knew nothing about running or marathons. He just kept saying, I'm here to finish the race and win. So that was funny for people, you know, they started kind of making fun of him a little bit. And then he started like everyone else did. And then when it was time to make a break, he didn't even know that it was, you know, possible to sleep during that race. He didn't read about it, didn't know anything about it. So he just kept running while other people slept for 6 hours. And he just kept on. So what happened the next day, he was the first one in the race because he just kept running with his pace. And that's when the media and the public became interested and intrigued by him, and they sort of started liking him. And someone kind of figured, okay, this man can't run in his wellies, so they stopped him and gave him the proper equipment, and he almost didn't even take it. But finally he did, which did help him to be kind of equal to the other runners. So what he did, he just kept running for 5 days with no sleep. And eventually he won. He won the race. He came in there with wellies and won the race. And I think the prize was $10,000. He didn't take the prize. He said, oh, just give the prize to the rest of the runners who finished. Just distribute it. I didn't come for the prize. I just came here to win. And when they asked him, how did you do it? How did you not sleep for 5 days? He just said, oh, that's normal for me. I'm a farmer, and, you know, we have those experiences very often with the animals that you don't get to sleep for long periods of time. And of course he had the strength and everything from his work. And for some reason he had that dream and that goal of coming there and doing the race. So the moral of the story is that everything is possible, everything can be done. And I just want to motivate you to know that whatever obstacles you have in your enterprises, whatever you know, issues, problems COVID imposed, you can get through them. If this farmer was running in his wellies and won a race that he never did before, you know, kind of try to find a little bit of motivation in that story. So just a little story to start the storytelling presentation. I thought that's neat, even though I'm not a perfect storyteller. And I didn't prepare that story, I didn't write it down, but just to kind of induce you into that kind of stage of mind of telling the stories. Now back to the marketing and the serious kind of way of doing things. What is the storytelling in marketing? Where does it sit? Because we gave you so many words and topics to deal with recently. We gave you branding, we gave you promotion, we gave you communication channels, target groups. So what is then storytelling in all of this? I don't want it all to pile up somewhere in your mind and for you not to know where to place the storytelling. Well, storytelling is a type of campaign in marketing. So you can use it as a campaign tool. And it's good to incorporate it early from the beginning and to use it consistently and regularly. So it allows you the connection with the customer from the first point of meeting the customer, and it helps you eventually sell a product, and that's the kind of second purpose of it. So throughout skillful writing, so you can write your story, not just tell it from the top of your head. You can prepare your stories, and the story is created obviously in a creative manner, and the purpose is for you to connect with the customer. And once you connect with the customer and do that on a regular basis, you become a trusted resource. Why are you trusted, and why are you perceived in a different way than if you weren't telling any stories? Well, because you're making an emotional connection. That's what story does. You're sending a message and you're being perceived as genuine. So that's what this marketing campaign tool does. The storytelling helps you being perceived in the right way. Now, of course, you have to be genuine at first. You have to start with being genuine to be perceived genuine, but this is the tool you use, storytelling. So then the customers, even though from the beginning they know that you're communicating to them to eventually sell them something, they don't mind, because you made this connection through storytelling, and they will be more inclined to purchase when you make that connection. So nothing's lost. You wanted to sell, and that's fine, and that's your purpose anyways. And they might want or not want to buy something, but you added this new value of telling stories and connecting emotionally. So what you give to the customer is respect, honesty, your story, your product. You kind of give them hope as well. And what they give back to you is attention, love, purchase, and eventually loyalty. So they might be coming back just because you chose this tool as your marketing tool. So this is why it works, okay? First of all, it works because we're all humans. Gone are the days when we used to just communicate sounding like little corporate robots. Maybe in the 80s, everything, even in the films and in the movies, everything was so corporate and everything was so professional. And yeah, you can still be professional, but who are you talking to? You're talking to human beings. And that's why you should use storytelling, in order to begin to feel that connection. When you're telling stories, common values are identified, and you're sending your message to them. So you're communicating your values, and whoever is the listener of the story can connect to you because they might recognize the common values they have with you. And then storytelling allows you to communicate themes like family, love, friendship, overcoming challenges, and other common subjects to everyone. And they're pretty much common to every nation. So the storytelling is a pretty powerful tool if you want to go beyond your national borders, because it allows you to have global reach and potential. Just globally, these are the things that are common to everyone: universal subjects, family, love, friendship, overcoming problems, and stuff like that. So then, even they previously had no interaction with you, your listeners, your target group are intrigued with your compelling story, and it gives them an incentive to become engaged with your company. And that's what you want. So what is your brand story? Now, how to place the storytelling and merge it together with your brand? Well, that's the first story you will tell. You need to start with your brand. It's not just what you tell people, it's also what you believe about yourself and your brand and your staff and your team. And then you send signals about that. So you have to be genuine, you have to be honest. That's why it's good to have these brainstorming sessions with your team. Or if you're a one-man show, one woman show, you just need to sit down and put all of this on a piece of paper and tell your brand story. And once you tell it and put emotions in it and say first to yourself, tell your story to yourself. Why does your company mean so much to you, or your enterprise, or your social mission? And how did you start off? Then it becomes your truth and you're genuine, and that's what you sound like. You sound truthful, you sound genuine, and that's how you get the big picture. And the big picture is made up of facts, feelings, interpretations. So everything you do and you did, each element of your product, of your business, of your brand, it all becomes your story. Even the way you package things. If you've seen recently, people come such a long way that they are even giving so much attention to their packaging. Even that can be the difference that separates you from the competitors. So every aspect that you gave your time to makes a difference and can become a part of your company's story. So these are the elements to create or capture your brand story. Now at the end, obviously, we'll have, as always, we'll have a piece of homework that you can take home, a set of questions that will guide you through the process of telling your story. And when you're doing that, you can go back to these as well. So you should start with your personal story or your brand story. How did you start, your history? If you are the founder or the owner, or you can relate to that. Why did you found the enterprise? Or if you joined it, how did you join it? And then the history of the brand as well. Then give a little passion to the story. So if you can't remember, if you're not the kind of person to share these kind of things, put it on a piece of paper and give yourself a task of remembering, why is your story a passionate story? What do you love about it? What the other, if you can't remember, what do others love about your enterprise? Your personality is important to your brand as well, because obviously, since you're sitting here at this workshop, you're an important part of your enterprise. So other members of your team can also do that. So different personalities in your team experience your brand in different ways, and it's good and lovely to have their perspectives as well in your story and to merge them. That's how your brand will have a complete story. The customers have their story as well. They have their perspective of your brand. Do you know what the story is there? Have you asked? Do you have an opportunity to hear the stories about your brand from someone else? So employee, we mentioned that already. And it's so important that your employees share the same vision and the same story of your brand, and that you keep repeating that in the most beautiful possible way, inspiring them. Just think of the opposite, when the employees don't share the story or the vision, and when they're not happy with where they are. How many times have we heard a bad story about the company from an employee, and that just changes perspective and damages the brand. So it's very important that your story kind of goes through each and every element and each person that touches your enterprise. Now, we mentioned the bad publicity a second ago. The bad publicity is something that a function of public relations deals with. You probably heard of PRs. Now, I want to give you context of a PR in the company versus storytelling. So public relations is a broader term than storytelling. Storytelling fits within public relations. So a PR manager, you can have one or you don't have to have one, but that's the person that oversees all the communications from the company towards anyone else in the public. Public relations is a strategy of communication process. It builds mutually beneficial relationships between organizations. and their public. Every team member can be a PR person. Doesn't have to be. There's probably, you might not employ specifically a PR person, but there's probably someone who's doing that more than anyone else. Maybe because they're talented for it, maybe because they like it. But just never forget that each person in your team, and volunteers included, are your PR people, which means that all of them should be aware of your story. And you should have a habit of repeating your story in written, in meetings, any kind of way you can imagine. Repeat your story over and over again so everyone hears it, understands it, and everyone's able to repeat it everywhere else. And that's how you become successful, by being consistent with who you are. You don't want people to tell a different story about your brand that you're telling. It might be still a positive story, but it should be the same or similar story that you're telling, and you should say that clearly to the team members. And it's because when you get that minute or two of attention in the public, you don't want the attention to go the wrong way. You don't want to be saying the wrong stories. So why would you do that? If you're saying something, make it count and make it give, make it produce the best reactions possible. And storytelling is a campaign tool to give exactly that, because it allows you to bring in emotions into that communication. So the old-fashioned type of PR would maybe, if you want, this is simplified, but if you want to think about PR without storytelling, it wouldn't be a good choice, because it would be kind of robotic, official, cold. Now, when you are getting that attention, when your time is a resource, so when you're spending your time and your other resources into telling your story, some kind of a story, let it not be the cold type of PR corporate story, let it be the true storytelling experience. Now, the image of Oprah here is on purpose. I chose that. I think she's the best example of a public relations person, even though that's not her title in any of her endeavors or companies. But she is a true PR. She tells stories. That's how she became who she is. She has the talent of telling stories. She knows what to bring forward. She knows how to communicate, how to evoke emotions, and how to kind of make people understand. So if you're ever confused of what your role should be or how you should tell a story, just remember Oprah. And what she's doing is actually not overly complicated. Yes, she is the number one person in media maybe for decades. But when you look at what she's doing, even when she's interviewing people, she's just talking. She's just talking like a normal person, just giving her feelings, her thoughts, and her conclusions about something. But I know that she's always prepared. So that's something else you can take from her. Always have that story prepared, and then you can enrich it with any other ideas that come in, but have it consistent still, okay? So now when we know what storytelling is, I'm gonna tell you why you can't just use storytelling just for the sake of telling the story. The way I did at the beginning, I told you story there. I did include a little bit of data, and I did include a little bit of call to action saying, please be motivated to overcome your obstacles or your problems. But ideally, your storytelling should have even more focused call to action. That's because you're selling something, you're selling products and services. So you should always connect your storytelling to a call of action that has your products and services in mind. Again, using the principle of not wasting any time or energy or resources. So I found a person here who can explain this better than I can. So I'm going to let you watch the video, and then we can go forward after this little video. All right, so I'll just play it a little bit and speed it up and explain what he's saying. So basically, he's just a little bit agitated that everyone's telling people to just tell stories without connecting information and data. So on the left side here with these people, he wants to give an example. These are two people who are buying a house, and he's putting himself in a perspective of a company that helped them. Actually, they're selling a house and he's helping them sell the house. So if you're just telling the story, you're going to say, oh, you know, Helen and Jack are selling their house, but they're having problems. Their house is on the market for a long time. And he's saying, okay, that's emotion. In evoking that emotion, you can even entertain people with the story. So you're telling a little bit about who Jack and Helen are, and that's you just telling the story there. But he's saying that's not enough, because you just told a story about two people and you're a company who represents them. You have to add something else. The other portion of what you're adding is actually data and information. So as a company who represents them, you will probably know information such as, okay, the prices of the houses, what the market is, what's happening on the market. So you're talking to your prospect new customers, and remember, you want to tell them the story of how you helped someone sell the house. So yes, you're going to evoke the emotion there of mentioning Helen and Jack and how they struggled, but then you have to say what you did for them. How long was the house on the market? Now there he says, okay, that's the information there, giving the information and targeting at the intellect of the listener. So you're targeting at entertainment bit of the brain, and you're targeting at the intellect part of thinking. So he's saying when you merge those two, then you have a story worth of telling, worth of investing your time and resources into. Now, in short, he's just gonna do a quick visual here on how to connect those two, because at the moment you have one version of the story which is completely emotion, storytelling, entertainment, and you just have on the other side just pure data. Okay, they were selling it for that much, it was that long on the market, it finally sold for that much. You know, so that's just pure data. So you have to marry those two to have the perfect version of the story. So he starts with the emotion there, with saying who these two people are and what they wanted to do and how they struggled, and he's just giving some piece of information there on the percentage of the sales done on the market, I think. So he brings in the information about what the market was at the moment and how many days the average sales took at that time. And then I think he just continued showing how many days it took him to help them to sell the house. So the point is there, even though we couldn't hear this man, I kind of gave the same point there. You have to marry the emotional side of story, the entertainment bit, with the information to have the call to action. So the way he finalized that, okay, Jack and Mary couldn't sell the story, couldn't sell the house. They came to our company. We supported them, helped them. The average selling time for that period was that and that. We helped them do that in less time with less resources. Eventually, these two people were happy. And if you want the same experience, please contact us. These are our contact details. So call to action at the end. Okay, so that's the point now. I've told you about storytelling from the beginning, leaving this on purpose for later. Now I'm just going to go back to the presentation. The points here are that you need to merge emotion and entertainment with information and intellect and add a call to action. Okay, so always storytelling and information. So after that after you becoming aware of the need to put in the information in your storytelling, because it can't just be pure amusement. Now it's time to think of voice and tone of voice that you need to use when telling your story. Now, just Grace, a question. Can you see the slide on voice and tone of voice here?
Yes, yeah, I can see it.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So I don't know if you ever thought about the voice and tone of voice for companies and for communicating company matters and your marketing, your stories, your brand. But there is such a thing. Just as in real life, you have your voice, and that's your voice. You can't really change it. But then you have a different tone of voice for different people you speak to. So you would speak with one tone to a child, a different tone to your parents, maybe to your co-workers you would have a different tone. I know when I give presentations, my tone of voice is slightly different. I would like it not to be like that, but it is whenever I listen back to it. So obviously tone of voice is something that you can control and manage. But the good news is when you're a company, so you weren't born with your voice, you can choose even the voice. So the way to go is when you're identifying who you are, who your brand is, your mission and vision, and all of those things we talked about, think about the voice you're going to be communicating in. Now, we mentioned this with the colors as well, and the visual identity. So it's all connected. Meaning, if you're a formal type of enterprise, then you're going to use the formal voice versus casual. If you are a serious company, that's completely opposite to being funny. There's a respectful way of communicating, irreverent, enthusiastic, or you can be factual. So those are the type of voices, and you can slightly change the tone of voice depending on who you're talking to, but you should again always be consistent. So if you are a compassionate company that communicates in a compassionate, emotional kind of way, maybe corrected by a little bit of formality and seriousness, it would be kind of inconsistent of you to start sharing content that's pure funny and pure kind of just joyful and sharing a bit of those memes that are just haha type of funny. Okay, so that's the choice you need to make before you start telling your story. You need to know how you're going to tell it, what your voice is going to be. Now, don't get confused when I say the voice. I don't just mean speaking and communicating orally. Your voice is traceable as well in the written communications. So this is a little example of Uber and how their tone of voice changed. Obviously, they made that decision. The before side of things, you can see they're saying, you're going places, we'll get you there. It's not completely formal. It's kind of a brave and kind of a snappy, and it is a bit distant still. There's you and me, and there's a little bit of bragging about the customer side of things. You're going places and we'll get you there. But there's a clear separation between them and the customer. They changed something, and it's not maybe even possible to explain how exactly, but the right side of things, the example on the right, the after one, is warmer. Where to, Jessica? They're warmer. It's like they took a step closer to the customer. There was a barrier in the way they communicated before, but now they took even a warmer approach, and they just said, where to, Jessica, and then she's invited to click on call to action, which is let's go. So it's very simple. It's just one or two sentences, but you can differentiate the voice and tone of voice. Even if the voice is the same or similar, the tone is definitely different between those two. Now, we wanted to give an example from this group of how stories are being told. There's no tone of this on this one, so that's good news. We won't have technical problems, I hope. What I did, I went to the Unaban Boyle Craft Shop Facebook page, and I was really impressed with the way this Facebook page tells the story. So you probably all know the way in the cover of the Facebook page you can put images or a slideshow or even a video. So that's an opportunity for you to tell a story, and I'll just play it and give comments while it plays. So when you land on the Boyle Craft Shop Facebook page, you can begin to watch this video, and from the first image it tells a story there, obviously of a little family, or of all the members of the family being able to experience these beautiful products. So it's clear that it's a happy place, a family place with beautiful products that kind of inspire. And then you can scroll down, and even when you scroll down, this Facebook page continues to tell the story. So it tells the story about this bracelet kit here, and the story is being told with combination of images and text. And then there's Meet Sarah. Was it Sarah? There's a story about people. We talked about that as well. So they're telling the story about this person, combining images and text again. And when you look at the whole Facebook page, through telling bits and pieces, portions of a story, they told the whole story actually. Now, after examples, some more examples, and I'll start off with the Outside Multicultural magazine, the magazine that I made. Now, the story behind that magazine is that I always wanted to, start a company or initiative, and I always wanted to write, and I always admired online magazines. So I merged that into one thing, which is this magazine on multicultural topics. But then there's even a deeper story behind that. You see, this magazine was made in my living room while juggling work and my own integration into new society and having a small baby. Often she would be in my lap while I tried to create a magazine. So that's just 2 sentences of the story behind the magazine. And I could use that, and I did write about it on the magazine. I could use that to give a more personal touch to the whole magazine. Now, because this magazine is made to communicate integration, acceptance, multicultural ideas, diversity, we had to choose a specific voice and tone of voice to say these things. Some people choose pointing out negative consequences or negative experiences to fight against anything that might be an obstacle for people who integrate into new societies. So you might be talking about fighting racism somewhere in the world. But we didn't choose that type of voice. We didn't want to go into the fight side of things. Instead, we chose inspire as our path. So as our voice and tone of voice. We wanted to be warm. We wanted to share people's stories. We wanted to inspire people to understand that there are more common things than things that separate people based on nationality, color of skin, ethnicity. So we wanted to be all on the positive and inspiring side of things. Now, having that voice chosen for ourselves, a tone of voice was also a bit provocative, but not in a bad way. So you see, We have the interesting people category, fresh opinions, and inspiration. So those are the three categories that we put our stories in. The fresh opinions one would be the one that gives a little bit of freshness and snappiness and posing questions and provoking thought. Not in the negative side of things, not with heavy criticism, but just a little bit. We always give a little seed of provocativeness in there. So that was also a choice, and we're staying consistent to that choice. And then we're inspiring with some poems, some artsy writing. So we have all of these categories, and all that merged together gives us our unique voice of communicating. And now I already mentioned integration, multiculturalism, and diversity are always in the mind of anyone who writes for us, and are always in our minds, because there's where our mission, social mission, stands. And this is the example, Bernice Bukes, be true to yourself, then you don't have to apologize for anything. So you see, we're warm, we're telling people stories, but we're also kind of snappy, and we're telling you, okay, you don't have to apologize. That's the subtle tone of voice we chose. Now you can trace it in the next article. Tell me, why don't the marketing agencies save this planet? So we're firm in the way we communicate. We're not all mushy and too emotional, but we're still warm, and we're showing that we care every step of the way. Same tone of voice traceable in this title. If you don't die alone, blame. If you die alone, blame your phone. This is where I write about how technology can distract us from really enjoying our conversations in our lives. Even when we're writing poems, the titles are somehow using the same tone. We're warm, but we're kind of telling you what to do, you know. Other titles, when kids won't play, we're trying to use gentle click bites, not the ones that are misleading, but the ones that inspire you to click on the article and read it. And often we're just straight to the point with our tone of voice and what we're saying. 3 outdoor activities for kids. If you don't have a garden, it's pretty clear what you want, what you're going to read about in there. So that's the kind of description of the voice, tone of voice that we chose for the whole magazine, and how we stayed consistent throughout different categories that we have on it. Now, before we have a wonderful interview with our Val, I would just propose if we can do a little break. So Grace, what do you think about that?
Sure, I'd love a cup of tea. I don't know about everybody else, so we take 5 minutes and grab a cup of tea, just even get up and move around for a couple of minutes. Sometimes I think when you sit for so long, you just need to shake a leg. And we say we come back at, so it's 11 now. We come back in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Okay, let's see.
See you in 5 minutes, everyone.
So just, I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with Zoom. I see some people in the chat. I am monitoring the chat while Sonia is presenting, and afterwards then hopefully, Sonia, you can monitor the chat when I do my little piece.
Sure,
And if anyone has any questions, I know sometimes as you're going through training, maybe a concept or a term or something is mentioned and it mightn't be, I know with me, I'm 100% sure of what that is, or might have something you'd like clear up. So if you'd like, please feel free to use the chat to ask questions or provide any comments or thoughts or anything else that you have. So yeah, we'd love to get your input as much as possible, and it just allows us as well to kind of tailor the session to your needs. That if you have something specific you'd like talked about or something brought into context, we can do that. So the more you can input and give us feedback, the more hopefully we can tailor the session to you as well. So just a little aside.
Yeah, the video kind of turned out okay, but yeah, we'll just send a link later. I'll do that later, so you can watch it all at home. And then I see Grace was mentioning call to action. So call to action is basically exactly what it says. You are asking your target group or whoever you're communicating to do something. So whenever you see a button somewhere on your phone, or a website, or any of the social media pages, whenever someone wants you to sign up for something, to click buy this product, to click call us, contact us, those are all calls to action. So basically every story should lead, that you tell, should lead to some call to action, some type of form, be it you asking people to communicate with you, to send you a message, to book a meeting, to come and visit your premises, to buy your product, to click on a certain link, any of those things, any action that you want to follow up after you said your story to someone, that's a call to action. So it's very important to have the strategy prepared, to have the call to action kind of prepared. You would need to know what you want from them before you start telling the story. So before you start telling the story, you need to have it all prepared and written somewhere. And then you can be confident about telling it whichever way you prefer. But it's always to have these things on the paper, because they're all strategic things. Even if you have such a team where you communicate to each other openly and kind of in a relaxed way, that's perfect. But even that is a strategy. So have someone just making little notes, and whatever you agree on, just kind of go back through these notes and agree on these points. Like, what are we saying? Who are we saying this to? And what's our call to action at the end of the day? So do you think, Grace, we can now do our interview?
Can't see everybody to know that they're all back or not, but I guess we're over our 5 minutes now, so
okay,
yeah, let's make a start again. Thanks, Anya.
Okay, lovely. So similar like last week, we have now Val as our guest, because Val Robus, she's part of our Momentum team, obviously, and Val has done so much more in not just one community, but more communities. Last week, we were talking to Val on building the community and doing some campaigns, and that fitted great in the last week's session. But this week, because Val is the ultimate storyteller, that's what we didn't mention the last time. So how she did all of those things that she did them through the tool of storytelling, which fits perfectly in what we're talking about today. So we figured this interview might be just the right thing to do now. So hi, Val. I don't know if you're ready to start, but I just want to ask you, just in relation to the story that I told at the beginning, don't you think that everything is possible if we just put our minds to it?
Absolutely. I think we're kind of our own worst enemy sometimes for talking ourselves out of things. I know I am. I don't know about everybody else. So sometimes just go for it. You know, sky's the limit, really.
Yeah, and just even my first, official question to you, I'm just looking at it here, it's in the notes. It's about you telling the story of a whole town or a county even. You told the story of Sligo. So if someone says things are impossible, they're not right. If you set your mind to it, it's obviously possible. When I think back of me moving to Sligo, the first thing, when I Googled Sligo, the first thing that popped out on Google was your blog, you telling the story on Sligo, and not just one thing. There was this whole pool of things that I could research thanks to your writing and you telling the story. So could you briefly kind of take us through what it takes to tell a story of a town or even a county the way you did?
Well, I suppose for me, obviously from my accent, I was born in England, but my parents were from Galway. So we came to Sligo for a week 30 years ago and fell in love with the place and moved the following year. And I didn't know anything about Sligo, nothing at all. All I knew was I'd seen Ben Bulben. That was it. Didn't know anything about the people, didn't know anything about the shops or the place or how things would work or anything. So really we swapped our high-powered jobs. So I swapped my high heels for a pair of wellies and we done up a house that had sheep living in it. So I suppose that was before there was the internet. But then I suppose when the internet came about and I started the blog, and it wasn't to do with Sligo, it was to do with kind of how I was dealing with life. My parents weren't well, there were a few issues, and I started the blog, and it was really just to get stuff out of my head. I didn't really consider myself telling stories, and I didn't think anyone was going to read them anyway. And they did in their droves. So then I decided, when you'd mention Sligo to people, a few people might go, oh yeah, Westlife. And that was it. When you're like, but there's so much more. So it was to tell people what there is. Like, we have the best of everything where we live, like in the whole of the Northwest, but people don't know about it. So I suppose that was my mission, really, to tell people about it. So through photos, through stories, through things that I'd done, and inspire other people to come on holiday, and even some of them move, you know. So that was it, really.
And you succeeded. You told so many stories, and probably to consistency. And now that's kind of part of your job also, to tell stories. So you did that in Britain, and you did a lot of interviews, but you were always consistent in your style and your tone of voice, and it seemed like it suited Sligo just the right way. So there's an inspiration, an idea for some of our participants on how they can approach their storytelling. It can be.
And yeah, I suppose as well, I would say to people, don't get too, for me, I never thought of a brand. I never thought of having a tone. It's just, I'm me. So I think when people read the blog, they kind of get to know me a bit. And when they see me in real life, I would kind of speak the same as I'd write. So they would know a bit more about me. So I suppose I never got hung up on the words branding or tone of voice. I was just me. So that was it, really.
You just stayed true to yourself. Now, the other part of our interview here is it's even more important, I think, because it's about purpose. There's no greater purpose for a storyteller than to help people. And this is another thing you succeeded again through this tool. Now we give it all these professional names, tool and brand and all of that, but it's just storytelling, and that's what you use. You use storytelling, and you still do that to help people. Can you tell us how you actually, now I know you don't maybe see it like that, but I am 100% sure that you're helping people daily, even by the stories you just put out there, and they're there for people to read them anytime, even when you're silent and you're not speaking. So can you tell us on how you kind of embarked on changing people's lives with storytelling?
Well, I suppose, geez, I don't know if I changed people's lives, but I suppose what happened was I went through depression, and excuse me, it hit me out of the blue, and I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. And the stories that I'd read already seemed to be younger people, or maybe people that had had a history of depression, and there was really nothing that related to me, the age I was, what happened, or how I would deal with it. So I started writing about that. Again, I'm very open on the blog. I would share quite a lot of things, because I do think if you help just even one person, and if I helped one person that was maybe suffering the way I was, and that maybe didn't have somebody they could reach out to, I wanted them to know that they weren't on their own. And through that, then it opened a whole conversation. Like, I honestly think that mental health should be spoken about a lot more than it is. If I had a broken leg, I would say my leg is in bits. So for me, it was the same thing, just to say, look, I'm not great today, you know, bear with me. And the support I got from people was like enormous. And then I ended up on TV talking to Claire Byrne about panic attacks. It was it was a bit bizarre, to be honest, because I was just telling my story, and then when people come forward and said that I'd helped them, it was huge. And I'd never, when I started writing about it, that wasn't the intention. I was just kind of writing because it helped me. I find whenever I write something, it gets it out of my head and I can kind of move on a bit, or it helps me focus. When I read back, I can kind of see maybe something that might help me a bit. So it was just it was huge. And I'm so grateful that it has helped people.
When you look back, it's actually the consequences of what you did are so big and serious, and you did the good thing by just being yourself and doing it genuinely, and by choosing, I think what I recognize in the way you communicated your stories is kindness. So just as a piece of advice to anyone communicating anything anywhere in the world, being kind in the way you present any story, I think is the right way to go, because you never know who's going to read it and what it's going to mean to them, I guess. So that was my impression, the number one impression on anything I read from you. It's that style of being kind and genuine. And now, as you said, to you it comes naturally. You obviously didn't take a piece of paper. But it comes naturally to you. But then your example is, particularly because of this, is so good for learning and drawing from it, because not all of us are natural storytellers, although in Ireland there are a lot of storytellers. I might not be the natural one, so I might need to take those notes, and your examples are really good for that. Last week, Val, we talked about how you had the Having a Laugh book campaign done, and that was successful. And probably the portion of that success lies in the fact that you did storytelling again. So you had to communicate what that campaign is about to people, and you did it, and people understood and obviously engaged. And if you can just kind of talk us through how you inspired action by telling the story there.
Yeah, so we came up at one of the coffee mornings, the Having a Laugh is a mental health charity, and we had a coffee morning and we all started telling stories, and then the idea came up, wouldn't this be a great idea for a book? Maybe if somebody wasn't in a good frame of mind, they can just have this book to dip in and dip out of. And it's a few funny stories. There's some real stories of real people that have gone through mental health issues, but it's inspiring. It's the nicer side of things. Well, not nicer, positive. Rather than, excuse me, dwelling on the negative, we've dealt with the positive side. So we had the conversation, then I was on a few local radio stations, and it was getting the point across that we wanted anyone that thought they had a story to submit a story. And as you say, we're a nation of storytellers, so there's so many great stories that you hear, and it went really well. And the thing I really loved about it with the coffee mornings, it's harder to get men to talk about their feelings, and I think that's probably a nationwide thing. But we really got men involved in the book. We have a lot of stories from men, and they're all brilliant. And we just had such support from all over the world. And again, that's where the social media, it gets the story way out there. So we'll be going to print. The launch is actually the 8th of October. Mm-hmm. So it's bizarre, because I actually met someone over the weekend, and they said they were talking to me around Christmas when the idea first came out. And they said they thought I was barking. But now here we are, we're nearly ready to print. So sky's the limit, go for it.
Yeah, it seems like everything you touch, Val, turns to gold, but
not everything.
Well, people start things and they don't finish things, and that's normal as well. But if you have right tools, I guess, whether they come naturally to you or you learn about them, if you have the right tools to do things.
Yeah, and also the right people around you. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You can't do everything. I would be one of these. I can do this, and then I'd get bogged down, and that's not good. But there's a team of us. There's 4 of us involved in the book, and from start to finish, we're nearly there now. It's just gone back for the second draft, and then, as I say, we'll go to print, and this is just the four of us, like where one can do all the Excel sheets, one can do contacting people, one can deal with sponsors. We all have our own little jobs, but we've all helped.
And I guess the whole team is aware of what the story behind this is. And again, you took that warm approach and a human approach, and you didn't communicate about your project in a kind of distant or cold manner. Instead, you went out there and talked to everyone and anyone around you. And it was always the same story because the story was genuine. Now, that was your project. I mean, the project that you were directly involved with, but then again, from time to time, actually very often, you tell stories about other businesses. Again, it goes to telling a story of a certain geographic region, and you're promoting the region as well. But this comes to you naturally. What's your experience with telling stories of other businesses, and do you think businesses need this? Not just from you, but do they need to have it with themselves? How were they reacting to you telling their stories?
Well, again, I suppose we're our own worst enemy when it comes to promoting ourselves. And I know with some of the businesses, they would find that fairly difficult to promote themselves. But like even last week, I went to a place called Drumcora City, and it's a city. It's called a city. It's in the wilds of Leitrim. But it's amazing. You're walking into a Wild West saloon. So I went for lunch. I was blown away by the place. I wrote about it. I know at least 2 or 3 different people have been since then, and I only went on Thursday. So it's just about inspiring other people to go and see these places because they're there and they need our support. So I'm always happy if anyone in the group wants their story told, just contact me. I'm always happy to put the spotlight on people, and it doesn't cost you anything. If you've got a good, like I know with Boyle, I love the market there. I've written about it just to tell other people, because we shouldn't be secret, and we should all be, I think, promoting each other, because if people come, they're not just going to come to one place, they're going to go to all the different places. So in Roscommon, they're not just going to come to Boyle, they'll go to Roscommon town, they'll go to the castle, they'll go exploring, so tell the story and tell people what's out there and what they can do.
Now I've seen the reaction, and I had a reaction to those photos that you're talking about, because it's
food.
delicious food, and the food tells the story on its own, plus your words. But I can imagine that that they also, the business, that they had a warm reaction to realizing that you shared such a story and that they inspired you. I guess they probably found out, and if they didn't, they'll be surprised then.
They've shared it actually. And another thing I would do, you see, if I'm going to write about a business, I tend not to write about negative experiences, because especially at this time, I don't think it's fair. So I would always be on the positive side of things. If there is something that I've been to that I haven't liked, I don't write about it. Some people would say then I'm not being genuine, but that's, like, I've had the blog for 11 years and I'm not going to do a business of damage because of maybe one bad experience, or maybe they were having an off day.
That's kindness again. That's all, again, the principle of kindness. And there you show that the storytelling can actually be a support system. And thank you for offering here to the participants, if they, if they want to be included, or if they want to get in touch with you. Maybe if anyone wants to do that, you can write to us here on the chat, or get in touch with Val directly, or with any of us. Now, when you were telling the stories about businesses and, having a laugh book, you obviously had to incorporate some of the data, some of the information. Even when I took a look at the visual of how to donate to the book being published, there's packages, there's numbers being mentioned, money, or when you're presenting a business, you might incorporate some of the information. However, when you do it, I never notice the data. They don't kind of, they don't pop out as irritating, but I do consume the data. Can you tell us how you do that magic? How do you present something businessy as not so businessy?
I never want to, when I'm telling people stories or whatever, I'm not selling them anything. I do have a website called Sligo Hub, and I notice when I do that, there's a way to do it in a nice way where you're encouraging people to go and visit the website. So you might tell them a hint of a story, as you were saying earlier about the clickbait, but nice clickbait. So like, I know recently the poor man that I don't know if any of you've seen the Celtic Trinity knot that's up as you're driving to Manor Hamilton, and the poor man recently passed away, but his family had told me the story years ago of how they did that knot, and how they had walkie-talkies, and one was on the lay-by, and they were directing the dad where to plant the trees. It's a fascinating story. So these trees now are in the Trinity knot shape, and especially at the autumn, round probably October time, if you're driving up there, take a glance over, you'll see them. But the story behind it was fascinating, so I put up a little tribute to the dad, and then encourage people, read more. You can read the story, and then I suppose if you were selling something, then you are telling people, then, you know, come and have a look, learn a bit more. So you can do it in a subtle way. I think for me, it's, although I'm not very subtle in real life, but I suppose through the blog and everything, it's a subtle way to kind of, with the sponsorship for the book, we didn't forcibly go after anybody. We didn't email anybody to ask them to sponsor. We just said, the book's coming out, we'd love if you could sponsor. Then the money that's raised from the book will go to the mental health charity. And now we're at the stage now where the sponsors are paying for the printing, which is phenomenal. And again, it was done in a very subtle way. Have a look at the website. The packages were there. There was no hard sell. I don't believe in a hard sell. You know, do it nicely.
That's a great point to leave it at, Val. So yeah, you do need to incorporate some sort of call to action, but it needs to be subtle. You don't need to oversell. And thank you for telling that side of things, because I might have left it at people might have gotten from what I was saying, always put that buy button in there, or no, don't do that.
No.
Even a link that leads to something else is a call to action. Or if it's obvious that things are on your website, or if you just say get in touch with us to share your opinions, that's a call to action as well. Eventually, communication with that particular person will lead to a relationship, and out of it you'll get other benefits. So call to actions, especially for social enterprises, could be those gentle reminders: get in touch, talk to us, send us a message, we're here. So I guess that's what I got from what you just said. Okay, well, I think you gave us so much. It's almost incredible that as a storyteller, you've done so many projects. And I didn't write it here, but in my head, the title here was Val Robus, the ultimate storyteller.
I wish. No, I just like talking, really.
Even now you gave us a few stories, and thank you so much. So if anyone has any questions for Val, you can ask them now, or you can type them in the chat, whichever way you prefer. I will just see if I have a new slide. I think I have a homework that connects everything we talked about. Val's stories and her experiences as well can be used in this homework. You can do it with your team. There's a set of questions here to help you build your brand story. You can remember what Val had in mind here. Just by building your brand story doesn't have to necessarily mean that you'll be all corporate or all kind of formal. You can still be representing yourself as a team, as a group of people. So I think that's the best way to go. Val has mentioned several examples where they just worked as a team of people. They didn't necessarily brand themselves as a group of professionals. So people like people and like those kind of stories. So that's the homework. We'll email it as always, so you can have it separately as a reminder. Now, I would enjoy a nice chat after this, after Val and me chatting for a while. If anyone else has any questions, this would be a perfect time. Or not even questions, if you want to give us examples of how you're doing your storytelling, if you're having any dilemmas with your storytelling, if I've maybe confused you with anything, you can ask that now and we can clear that up. So anyone who wants to talk for a little bit and ask us anything, now would be the good time. We can just undo the microphones.
I just want to say thanks very much for sharing our Facebook page of the craft shop. You know, learn so much listening to everybody else talking and your ideas and how we can better them. And we're always looking for new ways to reach more people when it comes with the Facebook page. I find that we get great reactions, as I said last week, but trying to lift up the numbers that see our page is always somewhere that we can improve on.
And thank you for that. And if I can just ask one further question, you probably did that change with the video at some point. I don't think Facebook even allowed it from the beginning. Did you notice any feedback or any change in number of visits or reviews or any kind of feedback from your target group or your followers when you did those things?
It wasn't actually myself that changed the video at the top. At the time, it was a gentleman that worked here, and he was great at that sort of promotional side. So I personally have only really taken over the Facebook page over the last sort of year and a half, 2 years, that I've been putting a lot into it. So I can't actually answer that for you. He doesn't even work with us. He moved on a while ago, but he did make a huge difference from what my colleagues have said when he put the video up. It brought more people in and attracted their attention, but personally, I wasn't here to see what was happening at that. I didn't get involved in it.
Yeah.
That's actually, that the video has inspired me, so I'm going to do that on my blog page. So there you go.
Yeah, and it's a good idea when you change something, or when you, from now on, when you start a new approach, a new story, a new way of telling story, try and kind of watch out for the differences that makes in people's reactions, just as a way of measuring things. You don't have to include big measuring tools, but just kind of the feedback that you might be getting from people. It will motivate you and it will give you an indication if you're going in the right way. Another way to go, you can always use this group and ask us all for feedback. If you do something or change something, you can always come back to us in any way you please, be it an email or whichever way you want to contact us and ask us, oh, I did something there, or I'm thinking of doing this. Could you check it, please? Or can you give us a feedback? So that can be us from Momentum, or I'm guessing anyone from the group here would be pleased to give each other feedback. Okay. If there's anyone else who would like to share their experience or pose a question or give a comment. I don't know if everyone's able to speak. In my side of things here, they're all having microphones muted. Grace.
Yeah, I can unmute anybody, or they can unmute themselves.
Oh, they can unmute.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if there's no further questions, I'll just give a brief introduction to what Grace is going to be talking about. I kind of connected these two dots before. I'll just repeat it now. At this stage of things, you might be thinking about bringing in volunteers or more volunteers into your team. And having volunteers is a great way to build your team, your resources. It's good for volunteers as well. There are different benefits. I can name few. You know, people might want to include themselves into the community better. Integration might be another part or motivation why people do volunteering. They might enjoy your mission and they might want to build their experience and knowledge. when people are coming into your team, the first thing you need to do is kind of let them know who you are, who they'll be representing, and give them the story about yourselves so they know what they're doing and so they can communicate it further, but communicate it the right way. So there's where those two topics connect the best way, okay? So Grace, I'll mute myself now and you can go on.
There, lovely, thanks, Sanya. Yeah, just I suppose before I get into the volunteering, one or two things that just popped up on Sanya's session as well. I suppose something to do with the call to action, and again, it kind of leads into the next little piece that we're going to cover. I think perhaps a good call to action for anyone that has a social enterprise is help us to help others, because essentially, you know, that's what your business is trying to do. As a social enterprise, you have an end user group, or you have somebody in mind that, you know, maybe it's the community, maybe it's a particular target group, but essentially what you're trying to do is help others. So that's potentially a nice call to action that, you know, isn't really selling as such, but it's that idea around caring. So that's maybe one to think of. And also kind of links in, as I say, to the volunteering section that we're going to look at now. Hopefully you can, oops, just jump to the right part. So volunteering, so last week this was on the agenda and we didn't get to cover it. So the theme is around digital tools to promote and facilitate volunteering, but we'll actually look at volunteering as a kind of a whole. We're also going to have a couple of polls. You'll know from last week I love my polls, so there's one or two little polls as we go through as well, just to gauge where you are, if you're actively involved in engaging volunteers. So we will have a look at that as we pop through this session. So to get started, a quick little poll here. Does your organization have a volunteer program or volunteers working with you? Yes, no, or not sure. So we will just run that little poll and see what sort of interest there is in volunteering. So last week, again, we talked about having an online community and how building an online community can potentially open you up to a volunteer base. So again, just to see if some of you are involved. So yes, we were talking about building an online community and opening up a volunteer base. So I guess something else that emerged last week, and again, we were talking about communications during COVID. In the last couple of months, we've seen a huge shift in people to want to give something back, to volunteer, and there are lots of benefits for that. So we'll start by looking at the benefits, and then we might look at some new ways for you to potentially encourage new volunteers to engage in your organisation. So some of the reasons why volunteers, why you should focus on volunteering. Again, being a social enterprise, you have a social mission. Again, you know, something that was covered in the last few weeks. We talked last week, as we said, about an online community and trying to engage people around your social mission. So if you can do that and you can engage volunteers around that social mission, you've got an increased work capacity. So it's an ability for you to maybe grow and build a side of your business, and to do so in a cost-effective way by imploring people to, you know, to do good, to give back, and to engage. So that would be the first and main kind of reason to focus on volunteering. Community spirit is a big one. Again, I know a lot of the organisations and the participants that have been on this session are community groups that have a kind of a vision or a cause that you're passionate about. There's some community tourism groups, there's a genealogy group, there's, you know, lots of different groups involved. And again, building a community spirit around you and your business is a big thing. And I think Val's input both this week and last week is key in kind of seeing how that community spirit is important and how it could really move your causes forward and your missions forward. Also, in listening to Val's piece there, and she was talking about the having a laugh charity and how there's 4 key people driving that forward, and each of them has a different skill maybe that they're bringing forward. I think she mentioned that one of them looks after the sponsorship, somebody else does the marketing. And I suppose thinking again about volunteers can bring additional skills to your organisation. So in the same way that you would recruit somebody for a specific role, you should also try to think about maybe recruiting a volunteer for a specific role. Volunteers can come from any sort of a background. You could potentially get somebody to help with your HR support, graphic design, IT skills, accountancy, receptionist, admin. The list is endless, really. I suppose the key thing is to try and, again, target the right people for the right job. And again, going back to last week, the idea of selling your mission. So it's trying to encourage volunteers to buy into your mission and then to give some of their skills to back up that mission and to further that mission. So the benefits for volunteers. So again, I guess when we think about selling a product, if you're selling something physical, the main thing you have to do, and you'll know this, I think even from the few of you that are selling, you're selling the benefits of something. So it's not just a cup, it's a beautiful cup, it's a farm cup, it's something that, you know, you're selling the idea of this. So selling the benefits of something, you also need to do that when you're trying to encourage volunteers. So you're selling the benefits to the volunteers. You're trying to get the volunteers to buy into this idea of giving their time to you. So how can you sell the benefits? So some of the things you can work on is how volunteers can give something back through and building on a sense of empathy for others. How they can grow their network. So volunteering provides lots of opportunities for network to meet others. A big one, given the amount of people who are potentially out of work at the moment or have extra time, maybe they have reduced work hours, volunteering is a great opportunity for people to build on their CV and to maybe increase the skill set. And it's always you know, something that's of great value to potential employers when they see that employees have engaged in volunteering and have been interested in giving something to others. It's a great skill to have. So I was going to ask another little Zoom poll, but I'm sure the first one wouldn't work, so we're not even going to try this, but just maybe we'll have a little discussion on this at the end about how difficult a task it is to recruit volunteers. If it's something that you're already doing, is it a difficult task? Do you find it easy? Are you not sure? Maybe you haven't been involved in the volunteer program to date, or how maybe difficult or easy you would imagine it to be. Again, the reason why I'm asking this is because there are a multitude of people out there who are interested in volunteering. Again, a little side here on the benefits of selling the benefits. And this is like an opportunity for volunteers to have fun, do good, form friendships, make an impact, improve your health, be part of a community, discover yourself, and there's lots of health benefits around volunteering. So something again that Sanya covered last week was how to create visuals. And again, I think when we look at this, you know, creating graphics like this is a lovely way to, lovely, thanks Val, I just see you're monitoring the chat, to design graphics and to sell volunteer opportunities in this kind of way. It's a lovely visual way of doing it. So again, thinking about the range of volunteers that are potentially out there, I wanted to put myself forward for a volunteer opportunity. So it's an opportunity for you all to maybe pitch me to be a volunteer for your organization. So here I am. I'd like to volunteer. I have skills in marketing, business planning, fundraising. I guess now this is I suppose just a little activity, because I think if you can fine tune your thinking into the type of person who could volunteer for your organization, it's not just somebody who maybe is, I think when I think of the type of volunteers that maybe work, you don't have to be somebody who has bucket loads of time. If you've got a little bit of time, you can do an awful lot. So so this is me wanting to volunteer, but there are some constraints to my volunteering ability. So obviously I have a full-time job. I have a young baby, and I also have a herd of cows that need looking after. So, but I'm still a potential volunteer. So I guess in the chat, or if you'd like to even unmute and have a little chat, I'd love to know how you would potentially pitch me as a volunteer. How would you convince me to be a volunteer for you? How would it work? Could I be a volunteer for you with all of these time constraints? So even I think, Val, to get us started, maybe you could say something about how I could maybe engage with the having a laugh. Could I? Would my time constraint stop me, or what would
No,
you?
not at all. The way we got our volunteers, and actually we were really surprised with how many we got. We put a call out through the Sligo Volunteer Centre. So we had a number of positions. Like, we were looking for, first of all, we were looking for interpreters. So some of the people had recorded their interviews but hadn't written them down. So transcribers, that's what we were looking for. So we had 3 people volunteer for that, and they could do it in their own time. So, I think for you, Grace, anything that you could do in your own time, there would be loads of things that you could volunteer for, because especially now these days, you don't actually physically have to be anywhere. You can do so much online,
Yeah, exactly.
Grace, first of all, I think you're too busy. Don't do it. But let's say you will do it. Go for me. No, don't go for Val. No, I'm joking. I've had some challenges with this bit. I've tried to engage volunteers to help me a little bit with the magazine. I find that I never approached someone who didn't say they want to be approached by similar, magazines or entities. But then I find that people are not so motivated if they don't actually have work. So if you can pay them something, if that's the type of volunteer, if the volunteer is there just to build experience and find a job from it, as soon as the volunteer gets the job, you should be aware that they should and will leave you. The first thing I ask is like, Grace, how many hours do you have per week? That would be my first question. And then the next thing would be very specific with the tasks for volunteers. So I would ask you if you could maintain my Facebook page, if you can post once a day, and I would give you a calendar and the topics to post. So that I would advise anyone to be very specific when engaging a volunteer about what to do.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Anybody else want me? Their volunteer.
You might be sorry you asked, Grace. I have a list as long as my arm.
Very good. If anyone else wants to jump in, I suppose it's just to kind of get in the mindset of, like Sanya said, there are people out there that maybe have limited time, have short amount of time. But again, if I had 2 hours or 3 hours a week to give, with the experience that I have, I could be of benefit to your business. So I think Val mentioned in the chat as well that in the Having a Laugh, 1 or 2 of you have a graphic designer who's a
Volunteer, yeah.
Volunteer.
And our editor is a volunteer. Now, the editor he came to the coffee morning, so he knew all about the charity. So that's his job, actually. He is an editor. So he edited the whole book for us. And then through the volunteer centre, again, we put a call out for a graphic designer. We had 6 people apply, which is bizarre because graphic designers, you'd think they'd be extremely busy. I honestly didn't think we were going to get anybody.
Wow.
So it's amazing. It's amazing the skill set that are out there, especially people that may not be in work at the moment. So, if you can contact your local volunteer centre, they're almost like a one-stop shop to get you volunteers, and you'd be surprised at the people you can get.
And we will talk about that a little bit. Just, I suppose, in Roscommon, the volunteer centre is a little bit different to the setup in Sligo, but we will talk about that. But I think even, as you say, I mean, the whole idea of there being people with skills out there, the fact that you could get 6 graphic designers is amazing, because I think as businesses, everyone here will know that it's something we all need. Everybody needs help with design, be it a logo, a flyer, or sometimes a brochure or a website. And to think that you could get 6 graphic designers with those skills that are, very much commercial skills they could charge for volunteering is amazing. So
absolutely. And the one that we're going with is one that's actually worked for a media company, so has like a massive CV, like it's unbelievable. He's doing an amazing job. So yeah, there are people out there. And also, you see, when people volunteer, it does look very good on their CV as well. I know that we shouldn't really be asking people to work for nothing, but it can kind of be a two-way street as well, that it can help them grow their career, because I know some employers, when they see that somebody's actually taken time to volunteer, it's a big tick. So
absolutely.
Yeah, if I can just come in there, I would have, this is Mary here, I don't seem to be able to send a chat for some strange reason, but just to say there's also an organisation which is called Board Match, if you're looking for some new board members, and sometimes you can get, people who are come to live, work in an area if, you don't have the volunteer centre. So that could be something that could be considered.
Brilliant, Mary. And I think, Val, something you mentioned there as well, I mean, how important do you think your social mission was? I mean, you got 6 volunteers for graphic designers, and how much do you think that was them buying into what you were doing and buying into, the idea of the whole?
Yeah, well, I suppose mental health is a big thing, and it's not really covered as much as, it's not covered as much as it should be. So I suppose there was that. And I think the people I know, some of them had recently moved to Ireland, and it's a way to get to know people. It's a way to get your word out. Like if you're applying for a job and you can show that you've volunteered for an Irish community or charity, like Having a Laugh is a registered charity. So, it will make a difference, I think. So yeah, it was unbelievable. I really didn't think we were going to get anybody, and to get 6 was amazing.
Yeah, brilliant. And thanks, Sanya. So you've popped up the Board Match website there on the chat, and again, we'll pop those links into the email, the follow-up email. Thanks, Val, for that input as well. So I suppose something again that Val mentioned there, and that's kind of the focus of this rest of the session, is on virtual volunteering. So remote working, as we talked about last week a little bit, is really here to stay, and virtual volunteering is becoming something of kind of a hot topic as well, and one that is potentially here to stay as well. I volunteer a little bit with my local community development committee, and I had a baby 16 months ago, and before that I was very active. I could go to all of the meetings. There was never a meeting that I missed. I helped with funding applications, I helped with branding of a local community hub, you name it, I was stuck in the middle of it. And then I had my little boy Paddy, and suddenly, my husband had been milking the cows in the evening, so I couldn't go to the meetings. So I suppose since COVID has came in the recent months, all of the meetings now have gone online. So I'm back stuck in the middle of everything again, because I can easily join those meetings online on Zoom, and can input more than ever, whereas before I couldn't physically get up to the community hall to attend the meeting. So I think, you know, talking again and going back to last week, we talked about communications post-COVID. There are huge opportunities there to maybe, you know, grow and develop your businesses and your social missions in new ways, and virtual volunteering is one of them. So before we wrap up, just a few little points on it. I suppose why it's an opportunity that you consider. In the last couple of months, there's been over 500,000 people in Ireland out of work. So there's lots of potential volunteers waiting to be enticed to engage. And as Val and the ladies mentioned there, volunteering, be it in a kind of an employed capacity or even on a board capacity, as Mary mentioned, it's a huge, I suppose, of benefit to people, both for their CV and in terms of just giving something back to society, kind of civic engagement. So there are lots of different types of volunteering. These are just a kind of a summary of a few of them. Again, there's a fabulous website, volunteer.ie. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it talks about micro volunteering, and something that Sanya mentioned was, you know, when she pitched me to work for her outside Multicultural magazine, how much time do you have? So maybe I only have small chunks of time. So micro volunteering opportunities might work for me, and maybe that's me maybe doing that one Facebook post a day, bite size, on demand, very little commitment. But again, it's a win-win for me and for Sanya if I was able to give her a little bit of help with that. Yeah, so some other different programs that are working virtually. Skilled volunteers can support participants on a program via email. So there's some beautiful examples in this volunteer.ie website of people who are maybe giving support to family members who have dementia, for example. So they're actually providing email support to people who have maybe somebody who's been diagnosed with dementia, and of course it's something very difficult to have to deal with. So there's skilled volunteers helping with that. Other examples, again, we saw this last week, and this one is a knitting one, so physical volunteering. This Team Hope are putting knitting skills to the use, and they're creating dolls and knitted items for the Christmas shoebox appeal that's going on at the moment. Last week we talked about the Sligo Sews Masks group and how they came together to do physical volunteering, like creating all of those PPE masks and gear at home. So physically volunteering at home to this cause. Other examples, again, Val mentioned a graphic designer, so you could have a potentially graphic designer, social media expert, website developer, anyone who could do anything online could potentially be a good virtual volunteer for you. In terms of then of the people who could potentially be a virtual volunteer, so TY secondary school students, I know my babysitter is TY, it was in TY in the springtime when the lockdown started, and suddenly, because she didn't have a very rigorous academic program, she had lots of free time, and the local school actually were trying to encourage them to become volunteers and to help with any COVID-19 causes that they could in particular. So again, I think there's a program there that you can link in with students, and they could potentially be volunteers. Active age groups are certainly very engaged in volunteering down here around us. Refugees and migrants are another one, in particular those that maybe haven't got the status to be full-time employed or to engage in work, but volunteering is an option. Those who are unemployed, there's a big, huge opportunity to engage students, potentially those that are out of work for the summer, bars and restaurants all being closed now. You know, there's huge opportunity there. And of course, there's lots of other groups as well.
Yeah, so we had some feedback here, so pleased to see that some of you are actually using the volunteers in what they're doing. Now, until Grace comes back, I'll just jump in with the rest of the volunteering experience, well, and challenges that volunteering might pose when you're trying to engage someone. When I first tried to do it for the magazine, when I tried to engage someone, I didn't know how to actually do it. Sorry, Grace, I'll just jumping in. I didn't know how to do how to engage someone. So I just asked for the people what they can do. But in my experience, it's much better situation when you actually know what needs to be done. And
can I, if you don't mind, if I can come in here?
Yeah.
Just from experience of working not in this part of the country, but getting people who are involved in, say, the pharmaceutical industry or other industries. Sometimes they're young people, they can bring a lot of fresh thinking. And I think it can be, you know, they may challenge you, or you may say, oh, well, this is the way we always did it. But sometimes it's good because, you know, it brings a perspective. And, you know, I also think in terms of, you know, the refugees or asylum seekers, we may think, well, they don't have the language. But for them, you're also giving them an opportunity to improve their English and things like that. So, and it's amazing if you volunteer, I think you come with maybe the right attitude and you want to give something. So I think it oftentimes can add value and energy into your organization.
Hello there, I'm back again. Thanks, Sonia. Yes, thank you for covering there. That's, I was just saying, that's the joys of living and working on a farm. You see things you shouldn't see when you look out the window. So just to kind of to sum up, I know we've just a few minutes left in the session. So we're talking about virtual volunteering. So to get you kind of some more insights into that, Volunteer Ireland have launched a really lovely campaign during COVID called Volunteer from Home. And again, I think this is something that potentially could be highlighted in Roscommon with all of the participants here. And it's something that will carry forward. It's a simple hashtag, Volunteer from Home. When you enter it in Facebook, a whole stream of opportunities pop up. So, I mean, if this was, I suppose, myself looking for an opportunity, this would be a hashtag I would be following to see what opportunities are available in my locality. And just to get, I suppose, an idea in terms of selling the opportunities, there are, you know, by searching for this hashtag and by using it and following it, you can see all of the different businesses that are, you know, promoting benefits, or promoting volunteer opportunities, and the way they're talking about the benefits. So I think I have included one or two examples. This, yes, again, one that popped up, not an Irish example, but I think a lovely one. So Volunteer from Home, this is opportunities at Leeds Beckett SU. So become a dementia friend of somebody. Again, explaining to somebody, you know, what the role is. Somebody that learns about dementia so they can help their community. Too many people are affected by it. Dementia Friends can help raise awareness and understanding that people living with dementia can continue to live in the way they want. And they're encouraging you to volunteer from home. It's a micro volunteering opportunity, so it doesn't take you know, too much work or too much time or taxing on your behalf. You can hashtag make a difference, and then you can follow the link. Then here's your call to action: to follow the link to learn more about how you can become a dementia friend. Similarly, this opportunity over here, Volunteer from Home, offers volunteers a series of easy and interesting tasks that can be done anytime, anywhere, on your own terms. In terms of selling this as an opportunity, the language here I think is really lovely. It's very, very simple. Not only are the projects interesting, they are fun, and they can make a huge difference to local charity or a worldwide project or a campaign. So again, selling the benefits. this is something that I think, you know, is easy to implement. Lovely, simple language, volunteer from home, micro-volunteering, make a difference. These hashtags then will make it easier for potential volunteers to find and to engage with the opportunities that you're promoting. So because last week we were talking about volunteering opportunities, we wanted to just include a few digital tools was the focus of last week. We wanted to include a few tools that can potentially help you to start a virtual volunteer program and to run one successfully. So Sanya and Val both mentioned the Sligo Volunteer Centre, and so they are a physical centre in Roscommon, but there is they're a physical centre in Sligo, and they actually promote this use of this iVolunteer app. Not sure if anybody has heard about it, but it's a really lovely tool that volunteers can use, and those that have volunteer opportunities. So you can download the app, you can post your volunteer opportunity, and volunteers can then search their local area for roles. And Volunteer Roscommon, which is an initiative of Roscommon Leader Partnership and a number of other organisations, are promoting this app, and they're working on bringing a volunteer centre to Roscommon. So there will be lots of support in the future for those of you who are interested in volunteering and promoting volunteering. So I suppose today's session is really just to maybe frame things that you're ready for those opportunities that are coming when the centre opens in Roscommon. So some other tools that are very useful. So for file sharing and collaboration, there's a lovely free tool called Dropbox. So depending on who you have working for you, maybe you have a graphic designer, maybe you have somebody who's doing social media, you might have somebody who's doing website content or blog posts, any amount of work. Dropbox is a lovely tool that you can use, and you can share with them, and it's basically somewhere where you can house all of your files and documents and work collaboratively on those together. Zoom, which we've all become very familiar with, is another great tool. It's something we use on a daily basis in work now, not just for webinars and for delivering training, but also to discuss things virtually. So the same way as we're communicating here today, we use Zoom to communicate with each other, to share our screen and talk through different documents that we're working on. So that's, again, another way that you could potentially communicate with virtual volunteers is through Zoom, through this video messaging, because of course it's harder now to maybe even meet your volunteers. If you have volunteers working for you now, it's hard to meet them and then engage with them. And certainly if you're going to engage virtual volunteers who could be in any location, you know, Zoom and online communication is a good way to go about it. Last tips for managing virtual volunteers. Again, a lot of these were talked about, I think, in Sanya and Val's pitch. So how to manage volunteers. So you need to give the same amount of time to virtual volunteers as you would traditional volunteers. Training and orientation, making sure they know your social mission, making sure they know and understand how you'd like your storytelling to be done, your mission marketing, everything that we've talked about in the last few weeks, bringing them up to speed on where you are and how you'd like to communicate with others. Being clear in your instructions and deadlines, so whether it's that one Facebook post a day that is done and is recorded, or if it's a bigger job like a graphic design of, be it a book like Having a Laugh or a logo or a flyer, that you know you're very clear on what it is needs to be done and when, and working with your volunteer then on the time that they have to kind of get that job done. for those of you that have maybe bigger organizations or, you know, more than one people, that the volunteer has one designated person, contact name and phone number that they can reach out to with questions that they have. So it's just providing that little bit of extra support, that if they do need something, that even though they're working remotely and virtually online, that they're not really working in isolation, that they are being supported. So just some kind of thoughts there on how to manage virtual volunteers. And again, we mentioned volunteerroscommon.ie. There's an absolutely beautiful website, credit to those that have created it, that has loads of information on volunteering, how you can promote it. There's an opportunity to register as an organisation, post volunteer opportunities, search for volunteer opportunities. So if you haven't engaged with that already, we would encourage you to do so. And again, keep an eye out there for news and updates on the new Roscommon Volunteer Centre that hopefully is in the pipeline in the next while. So that's kind of it on virtual volunteering. I'd love again to open up the floor for any thoughts or questions. I think we've had lots of interaction today, so I'll have a quick look at the chat and see if anything popped up there. In the meantime, if anyone has anything else that they'd like to add, it would be lovely to hear from you. I just see a comment here from Pierce about volunteers. They contribute with skills that greatly help and offer solutions to awkward blocks along the way, lift the spirit, great addition to any crew. They also help build morale when times are tough. That is lovely. I think that's, yeah, really lovely insight to hear that. Anybody, any other thoughts, comments, anything you'd like to share in volunteering? Have you thought about virtual volunteers, engaging them? Do you think you've learned something new today about how you might be able to engage them, how to encourage them to get involved? Very quiet. All quiet. Okay, well, we'll take that. That's a good sign. Again, as Sanya mentioned, you know, come back to us by email if there's something that you'd like to follow up on, if you'd like to even just have a chat. I know sometimes people don't like to share in this way online, but you might like to have a one-to-one chat by email afterwards. So by all means, please do join us in discussion on email, and we'd love to kind of continue the conversation. I think most people have booked their mentoring sessions. For anyone that may have maybe missed out on that, again, pop us an email and we'll see if we can get something organised for you or get you booked in for that. Next week's session, we will have Orla back to deliver it. It's session number 5. And there will be something on kind of, I suppose, looking to the future, maybe future opportunities and in the sector, and a kind of a wrap up of what we've covered for the last few weeks. So that's it from us. A little bit over time today. Apologies for that. Again, thanks to everyone for your input, your chats, for being here today. And as always, we'll send you out the recording after the session, and we will see you back here next week. Orla will be here, and yeah, that's it from us today. So thanks very much. Sanya, would you like to say goodbye to everybody?
I can see a raised hand there, if I'm right, if I can read this right. Mary Keane.
Oh yes, I think that was
raised the hand.
Yeah. No, that was just earlier.
Okay, sorry.
Just asking, like, were you on next week? So that was the question I wanted to ask. Okay, thank you to everyone. Great to see you.
Thanks very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Bye bye, everybody.
Talk to you soon.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.